So for enabling the rule TDS, first of all, we need to go to settings, configuration, and then we'll be going to compliance because TDS is a part of compliance. And there is an option of TDS withholding tax. And the description is that the feature is required to enable TDS module to compute TDS and generate the reports accordingly. Okay, so there are two toggle buttons which needs to be enabled as per the requirement of the client. First of all is TDS, that is, you will just enable the TDS, make the masters, book the entries with the manual TDS computation and all. The second one is automate TDS computation. You will decide a rule, you will update a certain masters according to which the rule will work automatically at the time of transaction, and you don't have to make any unnecessary calculations, get into the detailed calculation. Okay, this is correct. This is the amount which needs to be computed at the time of invoice booking or at the time of payment. Payment, I won't say because in the payment entry, we don't have any expense ledger and the rule is defined on the expense ledger. So yes, after enabling TDS and automate TDS computation, we will first go and create our masters. So for creating a rule TDS ledgers, we need to go to masters, accounts, ledger, and create. Okay, so while creating rule TDS ledgers, we need to give the TDS ledger, which is TDS at the rate 194I. And then I am going to give it as duties and taxes, or as per the ledger group, whichever is applicable in the company. The category would be duty tax, and the ledger group I am updating it as duties and taxes. And then I will be going to the tax info because over here I need to define the nature of this ledger, because simply giving the name as TDS, my system is not going to understand. So I need to put give a certain command to the system that this is a TDS ledger and it needs to be treated like this. And then I will give the rate as 10%, give the applicable rate. I am putting it as 1 for 2023. And then over here, I can search for the required TDS section, which needs to be created in the system, and click on save. Since it's already created in my company, so I will not create one, and I'll quickly go to the edit screen and I'll show it to you. So TDS on rent under section 194I, I will just click over here and I'll go for the rates and infos. This is the rate that was defined at the time of creation of TDS ledgers. And then it comes the taxes info where all details has been captured. So this was the first step after enabling the rule TDS or the TDS toggle button in my settings configuration. Then comes what would be my second step. Okay, great. So now I will be going to transactions, accounts, and voucher. I am switching to Calcutta, for example. And I will select the voucher type as journal. And over here, if you can see, there is a TDS compute button coming up over here. So for example, let's go to some other, okay. So how does this occurs? For this, we need to go to settings, TX and configuration, select the transaction nature as journal or whichever nature, and the required voucher type. In my case, it's journal. And over here, it's allow service tax and TDS ledger. So this parameter needs to be enabled as yes, so that you can automatically compute the rule TDS. Now, since we are talking about consistently talking about the rule coming up over here, so what we'll do, we need to set a certain rule in my masters. So after enabling the parameter, we need to go to masters, accounts, and rule TDS. So we need to create a rule. We need to define a rule for rule TDS. So I have already created one. Let me just show it and run through that particular rule. So this is a rule name which I have created. Let's go through it. So over here in my rule, it's applicable ledger group wise. We can always create the rules ledger wise or party type wise. Over here, I've created it as ledger group wise, and I'm giving the rule name as sundry creditors. Now my rule name can be anything. It should be as per my identification of the rule master. So it has nothing to do with the configuration of the system or anything. It's just the name which we are assigning it to my masters. And then it is my applicable date, from date and to date. And then this particular rule is applicable in which segment? It is applicable for the entire segments, or it is applicable for a specific segment in my system. So that segment needs to be updated over here. And then we need to define the ledger group. In my case, I have searched the ledger group as test creditor for EXP. That means any ledger which is created under the ledger group of test creditor or for EXP, and the value is greater than amount as 0, and my expense ledger is guest house rent, then my TDS on rent should get computed with an amount of 10%. So this is the rule which is defined over here. Now there are two more options reflecting in your screen, which is or and. Now what is the difference between or and? I am creating a ledger masters wherein I am giving a command to my system that any ledgers or any party created under the ledger group of test creditors and having the expense ledger as guest house rent or guest house rent hyphen pre-OP. That means in my entry, either I can give guest house rent or I can give this particular ledger to compute TDS on net rent 194I with a percentage of 10%. This is one criteria. In case if you have a requirement that you want to compute TDS basis that both the ledgers, I mean, it's a mandate that whenever you are updating both the expense ledgers in that particular entry, then only TDS on rent 194I should get computed with a 10%. You need to click on plus sign. So this is the functionality and the difference between and or. Hope I'm clear about it. Okay, so currently we'll be doing few entries and then accordingly we'll be able to know in more details. So in my masters, I have used the rule of or and I'm not using the rule of and. So let me just put a rule of guest, pre-OP, and close. And then click on submit. My data got saved successfully. Now I'll go to transactions, accounts, and voucher. Over here, so we had few rules coming in over here, like my ledger group was test creditor for EXP. So in my transaction screen, I will be crediting Gopal Enterprises. Now you can always see over here whether this is from this particular group or not. So I'm pretty much sure, okay, this is a ledger group which it has been created in. And I'm putting an amount of 1500. And say suppose it got credit. I'm making it at credit. And then GP 001 and create. Now my expense ledger was guest house expenses. Again, either or concept. So I will just update the guest house expenses as 1500, give the cost center, whichever is necessary. And create. And now I'll click on TDS compute. What's wrong with my entry that the TDS did not get computed? Anyone, if you can help me out from this? Since we created the masters and then only we are doing the entries in this particular segment, right? So what mistake did I do that I am unable to compute the TDS? Anyone from the team, if they can help me out with this? Okay, no one. In this case, I need to go back and check whether I'm using the correct expense ledger or not. If you can see over here in my transaction screen, it's guest house rent, and over here I have selected the ledger as guest house expenses. How will my system understand whether the TDS needs to be computed or not? Right? So we need to take the exact ledger or the exact expense ledger which is defined in my masters. No extra space, no extra S, because that completely becomes a different ledger. And then if I click on TDS compute, automatically my bill amount got changed from 1500 to 1350. And I am having one more row reflecting as TDS on rent 194I. And I will give as being entry booked with TDS. Okay. So I have already booked one journal entry with my TDS ledger. So it should reflect in my reports and TDS compliance, other, and TDS. Let's check our entry. Okay, so there are two entries. One entry I updated in front of you, and the one entry was updated previously from my end in the system. So I'll quickly go to the ledger report to show that. Gopal Enterprises and today's date. So these are the two TDS ledgers which should reflect in my TDS report. So I will click over here. Whoa, I cannot see any transactions. Where are my transactions? Did something go wrong with the RealBooks? Anyone from the team? If someone can help me out with my mistake? Okay, no one. All right. The reason why it is not reflecting, and it is reflecting in my summary, that as per my RealBooks, there is one param in my expense ledger that I need to define in my expense ledger master whether the rule deduct TDS is applicable for that expense ledger or not. And if it is not applicable, it will reflect in your summary, but it will not reflect in your detailed ways. So how to fix it and how to identify that which are all those expense ledgers in the system. So there is an option of TDS not return. Anyways, I'll proceed. So there is a report which says the TDS return summary. Over here, you can find the list of expense ledgers where the deduct TDS masters marking is missing in the system. It can give you a clear identification that these many entries have been booked in your books of accounts, but the deduct TDS masters is not enabled over here. So how to do that? We'll just copy this expense ledger, go to masters, accounts, ledger, edit. And then I will click on edit. There is an option of deduct TDS parameter in my ledger master. So I need to enable this, click on save. Then again, come back to reports, accounts, compliance, others, and then TDS. And now if I go and click on summary, let's do it for the current date only. So it's 2. Now you can see the expense amount is also reflecting. Previously, the expense amount was also not reflecting. So now if I click on TDS on rent 194I, I am getting 2 transactions, one which was done in front of you, which was GP001, and the other one was already present in my system. So what all details we are getting? We are getting the segment name, date, party ledger, PAN number, deductee type, VNUM, party reference number, TDS section, expense ledger, expense amount, the TDS amount, the percentage, and the due amount. So this was about the auto computation of TDS part. This is the TDS report, which is coming after booking of my entries. And there are a few more parameters coming in over here. Like over here, you're not finding any TDS ledger coming in. You can find the deductee type, you can find the party ledger and all sorts of details, but you're not finding the TDS ledger. So once you enable this toggle button, you will automatically find the TDS ledger option coming up over here. And if you click over here, you'll automatically get the transaction edit part. Okay, this was first. Let's see what was second. In case if you're using any voucher property, then you can always click on voucher properties, and this will also get displayed and the GST details in case the GST is computed in that particular entry wherein you are computing the TDS also. So we'll be doing that particular entry as well. Okay, so after doing the TDS entries, if I want to make a challan or I want to make the payment of the TDS entry so that my 26Q payment entry is getting automatically posted in my RealBooks just in order to book the nullified entry in my books of accounts. How to do that? So we'll be clicking over here and here. So the moment I click over here, my payable amount the field gets activated and I can update the amount as per my requirement or as per the payment that I'm doing to the government. It can be equal to or less than the payable amount, whichever is reflecting over here. So what to do next? So you will be having an option of pay. I will click on pay over here. And then we are having the sections which needs to be selected from this drop down. I will be selecting 194I, the BSR code, for example, CHQ0, challan number. The voucher number will get auto-generated. The TDS on rent is already there. I will select the bank from which the TDS is being paid, and I will click on TDS challan. Okay. I will click on payment. Okay. My entry got saved successfully, and there is few more options reflecting over here that the challan has already got generated in the system. If I go towards my right, the TDS paid amount is reflecting. Initially, it was reflecting as payable amount. Now it is reflecting under the TDS paid amount because I didn't update the partial amount. I updated the entire amount, and the challan number is reflecting since no partial amount was updated. So the due amount is 0. So you can always, in case if you have by mistake made any entries, you can always untag the TDS payment entry and redo whatever corrections you want to do. So in this case, I don't want to make any changes. I will go to reports, accounts, daily reports, and then ledger. This time I am updating the TDS 194 rent ledger. And I'll click on search. So there are 3 transactions coming up over here. 2 entries which were done manually by me, and the other one is the payment transaction which I did from the TDS report, and automatically the 26Q payment is reflecting over here, and the notes part is reflecting as a narration in my books. So this is the challan payment or the TDS payment entry which is getting auto-populated in my books of accounts. So as you know, we have already created the rule as like under sundry creditors, and few entries were also done. So what I will be doing, I want to do the same entry in my Bhavanipur segment also. So I will be switching the segment and I will putting one transaction. We need to go to masters, account, voucher, edit, journal. Since I'm in my Bhavanipur segment and my numbering, if I go in 23-24, I don't have any numbering over here. Since I don't have any numbering part in this particular segment, that means this particular voucher type cannot be used in my Bhavanipur segment as of now. Okay. So that's the reason I'm unable to do it. Okay, fine. I'll not do it. I'll want to do it my journal voucher manual. It's auto increment without reset. Can I use this in my transaction for booking TDS? Yes or no, Ishita?
Yes, we can use that.
Okay, thank you. So I'll quickly go to accounts, voucher, and journal. Still, I'm unable to do it. Why? Any more configuration that needs to be checked? What can be a case? The visibility is disabled. So there are two to three things where we need to be pretty much clear on that why the voucher type is not reflecting in my transaction screen. First is if the numbering part is auto increment without reset, whether the numbering has been done for that particular segment or not. That is point number one. Second point, if the voucher type visibility is enabled or not. If the visibility is disabled, then definitely I won't be able to book any kind of transactions in that particular voucher type, right? So let's take this particular, let's make it visible. Save successfully. And then go to transactions, accounts, voucher. And journal manual. Now I'm getting this voucher type. That's great. So that was the expense ledger. Guest house rent. And for example, this time I'll give it at 8,000. And put the as Gopal Enterprises. I will give the bill as GP-003.
Hello.
Yes.
I guess we won't be able to pass the entry for that particular TDS rule
Why?
because in that we selected the segment Calcutta only.
Thank you so much for highlighting this, Deepika. We cannot create or we cannot use that rule in this particular segment because in my rule, I clearly defined that my rule is applicable only and only for Calcutta segment. It's not applicable for any other segment because no other rules is available in the system. Okay. So yes, that was a good one, Deepika. Then what I need to do, either I'll have to create one more rule for Bhawanipur segment, or probably I'll have to select all segment. In my case, Demo Solutions Private Limited is my company's name. And that's the reason I need to select the segment name as Demo Solutions Private Limited and click on save. And then come back to my transaction screen and refresh it. Then I need to do it as debit as guest house rent. And Gopal Enterprises. So over here, I am now being able to do the auto computation of my rule over here. So let's now figure out that this is the specific, okay, one entry, one expense ledger has been debited, then the party has been credited, my expenses also coming over here. So what if I need to pay tax in my expense ledger? If tax is applicable, I want the auto computation of tax as well as I want the auto computation of TDS. Now how to do that? So for this, what we need to do, we need to take my expense ledger, go to masters, accounts, ledger, and edit. I will search the necessary ledger and give the nature of supply as taxable. And for example, I'm giving the data as 18. And I will click on save for my tax configuration file. So I'll click on save. And yes, let's check if my tax configuration has been updated over here or not. Yes, all the input ledgers have been updated. Now, do I need to make any further changes for auto computation of GST with auto computation of TDS for the voucher nature journal manual? Anyone? Or I can just initially proceed how to do it.
In voucher type.
Okay. Voucher type masters?
Yes, account,
okay.
vouchers.
Okay.
Edit.
All right.
Particular voucher, the GST computation should be automatic.
Thank you. GST configuration for that expense ledger needs to be automatic. And then if we click save the voucher type master with this configuration. And now if you go to transactions, accounts, and voucher. And now if I give the expense ledger as guest house rent. thousand. Then I am giving the credit ledger as Gopal Enterprises. Now, if I give the GST compute button with the bill, obviously, automatically my GST ledgers have been computed over here with the rate of 18%. My breakup can be seen from the GST breakup option. And there the GST rate percentage is 99 and the breakup value is also reflecting over here. Now, if I click on TDS compute, my billing party amount got changed and it got updated automatically with the TDS on rent 194I. So I was able to make my auto computation of TDS as well as the auto computation of GST in one single entry without having a manual calculator or the Excel in my system. So now I can quickly click on submit. Okay. And now if I go to my compliance, compliance, others, and TDS, and click on summary, I will give the today's date, for example. And now if I click on TDS on rent, it's reflecting over here.